beloved, chosen one. There is a reason your life has never followed normal rules, a reason the usual paths never fit your feet, and a reason your spirit felt older than your age and heavier than your experiences. From the beginning, there was a quiet separation at work. Not because you were flawed, but because you were marked. People drifted away, environments collapsed, doors closed without explanation, and connections dissolved even when affection was real. This was not abandonment. This was not rejection. This was divine containment. You were not being pushed out. You were being sealed in. What you carry inside you was never meant to be shaped by crowds or contaminated by noise. It is not emotional energy that rises and falls with moods. It is not motivation that fades when life becomes difficult. What you carry is cosmic currency, compressed, refined, and guarded by design. It is a frequency that destabilizes darkness simply by existing. That is why your life required silence. That is why distractions were removed. That is why certain people could not stay, no matter how hard they tried. The gift inside you cannot be diluted by the wrong hands, cannot be activated in chaos, and cannot mature under constant interference. Your loneliness was not a punishment. It was a lock. A lock protects what is valuable, and what you carry is beyond price. Darkness recognized it early. Opposition studied your patterns, tested your resilience, and attempted to infiltrate your emotions, your habits, and your confidence. There were moments when the pressure felt transactional, as if unseen forces were trying to negotiate access to your spirit, through fear, through temptation, through exhaustion. But you were never for sale. The isolation was not to break you, it was to stabilize you. Every quiet season strengthened your inner architecture. Every unanswered question trained your discernment. Every delayed connection refined your boundaries. And now, chosen one, understand this clearly. If this message is finding you, the protection phase is nearly complete. The walls that once felt restrictive are about to become launch points. Before we go any further, type "I am chosen" in the comments, not for validation, not for performance, but for alignment. Words are keys, and alignment activates recognition. And if your spirit feels a deep resonance with this truth, like this video and subscribe, because what is unfolding now is not mainstream revelation. It is reserved for the separated, for those who were hidden before they were revealed. You were not delayed. You were preserved. Now that you understand this was never coincidence, now that your spirit is awake and listening, and now that the silence makes sense, now, let's dive deeper. Point 1. Your loneliness is not emotional. It is strategic. Chosen. 1. The first misunderstanding you were conditioned to believe is that loneliness is a flaw in your life, a defect to be fixed, a sign that you somehow fell behind while others moved forward. Society trained you to interpret absence as failure, silence as rejection, and separation as evidence that something is wrong with you. From an early age, you were taught that being surrounded by people equals worth, that constant stimulation equals success, and that solitude means something is missing. But your loneliness did not come from lack. It came from precision. This was not an emotional season, it was a strategic one. Your nervous system was being quietly rewired away from external validation and toward internal stability. Your spirit was being trained to self-regulate without witnesses, applause, or reassurance. If people had stayed while this internal recalibration was happening, you would have leaned outward instead of inward. You would have mistaken familiarity for safety and attachment for alignment. So the connections thinned, conversations shortened, invitations stopped. And what felt like abandonment was actually divine subtraction. You were being removed from noise so your intuition could grow sharper, cleaner, and more accurate. Loneliness was not meant to break you. It was meant to detox you from dependency. This is why distractions fell away at the same time your awareness increased. You started noticing patterns you once ignored, motives you once excused, and truths you once avoided. You were being conditioned to hear yourself clearly, without interference, without distortion. This is the stage where most people panic and regress, rushing back into familiar chaos just to escape the discomfort of stillness. But you stayed. You endured the quiet. You learned how to sit with unanswered questions and unresolved emotions without running from them. In that silence, your discernment matured. Your emotional reflexes slowed. Your sense of self stopped bending to outside pressure. You began to realize that not everyone who leaves is a loss, and not every empty space needs to be filled. Some spaces are meant to remain open, so something truer can enter later. What you thought was isolation was actually initiation. What you called loneliness was preparation. And the fact that you did not numb yourself, distract yourself, or abandon yourself during this phase already separates you from the many who never make it through this gate. Point 2. Your gift is not talent, it is frequency. Chosen one, talents can be trained, copied, refined, and sold, but what you carry cannot be duplicated or transferred. Your gift is not located in your skills, your achievements, or the titles attached to your name. Your gift is what happens when you enter a space without announcing yourself. It is the quiet shift in the air that people feel before they understand why they feel it. It is the way conversations soften, sharpen, or suddenly lose their false confidence when you are present. It is the moment when noise rearranges itself around your stillness. This is not personality. This is frequency. And frequency is not meant to be displayed recklessly. It requires containment, maturation, and restraint. When frequency develops too early in crowded environments, it does not elevate the room, it destabilizes it. The carrier becomes overstimulated, misunderstood, and fragmented, while the environment reacts with confusion, projection, or resistance. That is why your life pulled inward instead of outward. That withdrawal was not a failure. It was structural reinforcement. Your nervous system had to learn how to hold higher voltage without burning itself out. Your emotional reactions had to slow so you would no longer leak power through impulse or over-explanation. Your perception had to deepen so you could see beneath appearances instead of being hypnotized by them. This is why chaos no longer excites you, and drama no longer entertains you. What once felt stimulating now feels noisy, inefficient, and draining. Your frequency outgrew stimulation because stimulation is for those still trying to feel alive. You no longer need access to confirm your existence. Solitude, then, was not imposed to punish you or isolate you from life. It was necessary to calibrate you. In silence, your system learned coherence. In stillness, your presence became dense and grounded. This is also why people misread you. Some sense peace around you, as if their internal static quiets when you arrive. Others feel threatened, exposed, or uneasy without knowing why. Both reactions are correct. Frequency does not create responses. It reveals what already exists in others. Those aligned feel relief. Those distorted feel disruption. That is why darkness notices you without introduction. Not because you announced yourself, but because your presence interrupts illusion, weakens false structures, and destabilizes what survives only through noise. Point 3. The enemy tried to access you through proximity. Chosen one, understand this clearly and let it settle deeply into your awareness. The greatest vulnerability for a high-value soul has never been open attack, loud opposition, or visible enemies. Those things awaken your instincts and sharpen your discernment. The true danger has always been access. You were not approached through confrontation, because confrontation would have revealed intent too early. You were approached through familiarity, emotional proximity, shared history, affection, and trust. The enemy rarely tries to break down the door of a chosen life. It waits patiently for permission to be invited inside. Redirection is far more efficient than destruction, because a redirected soul believes it is still moving forward while quietly drifting off course. And redirection almost always arrives disguised as connection. That is why some relationships never felt openly hostile, yet slowly drained your clarity, energy, confidence, and peace. That is why you felt confused instead of abused, exhausted instead of attacked, and foggy instead of broken. You questioned yourself because the disturbance was subtle, engineered to bypass your defenses. These were not misunderstandings. They were not coincidences. They were access attempts. Emotional cords were formed not to support you, but to siphon focus, delay growth, and anchor you to versions of yourself you were meant to outgrow. The moment your awareness sharpened enough to feel the imbalance, the separation began. Sometimes it unfolded gently, like a quiet, drifting apart. Sometimes it happened abruptly, like a door slammed without warning. In both cases, it was not punishment. It was protection. God closed doors you kept trying to reopen because those doors were never exits. They were containment systems. They limited your range, your vision, and your authority. You thought you were preserving connection, but heaven was preserving your assignment. This is why certain people vanished without explanation. This is why conversations ended unfinished. This is why closure never came. Closure would have kept the cord alive, and cords are conduits. Silence was the mercy. Distance was the shield. What felt like loss was actually retrieval. You were being pulled back into alignment, away from subtle interference, away from emotional noise, and back into clarity. The isolation was not abandonment. It was recalibration. When access is removed, power returns. When cords dissolve, vision sharpens. And when God creates silence around you, it is because something sacred is being protected, refined, and prepared to move forward without distortion. Point 4. Why your life felt delayed, while others advanced. Chosen. 1. Delay is only visible on the surface. Underneath, something else was happening, something precise, deliberate, and irreversible. While others were stacking achievements, you were dismantling illusions. While they were collecting titles, labels, and borrowed identities, you were quietly shedding everything that was never truly yours. Your path appeared slower because you were not moving sideways like the world expects. You were moving inward. Depth does not travel horizontally. It descends first. And descent is always mistaken for stagnation by those who only measure progress by speed. Foundations are never visible from the outside. No one applauds what is built underground. Yet when pressure comes, when storms rise, when systems collapse, when masks crack, only foundations remain standing. You were not being held back. You were being anchored. Life was teaching you how to move without panic, how to build without attachment, and how to succeed without losing yourself in the process. Many people reach milestones and collapse immediately afterward because they arrived with fragile interiors. They climbed fast, but they carried unresolved fear, dependence on validation, and identities stitched together by external approval. When the weight of success arrived, it exposed what had never been reinforced. You were delayed, so your interior could become immovable. Every pause stripped you of impatience. Every silence trained you to listen. Every closed door forced you to develop self-trust instead of shortcuts. This is why you no longer rush. This is why urgency fell away from you naturally. You learned patience not as a moral virtue, but as operational power. You realized that reacting quickly is not the same as moving wisely. You learned how to let things unfold without forcing outcomes, because you understood that anything rushed must later be repaired. You began to recognize timing as intelligence. You stopped chasing alignment and started embodying it. What others mistook as stagnation was actually compression. Pressure shaping you into something solid. You were being calibrated to hold more without breaking, to lead without ego, and to receive without attachment. Now, when movement begins, it will look sudden to those who weren't watching closely. But you will know the truth. Nothing about this is sudden. It is the release of stored strength. The world moves fast, but collapses faster. You move slowly, but when you move, you last. Point 5. Your gift is worth trillions because it cannot be replicated. Chosen one, delay is only visible on the surface because underneath something far more deliberate was taking place. While the world measured time in milestones and applause, your life was being measured in depth, precision, and readiness. The world values what can be scaled, repeated, and multiplied without loss, but heaven values what cannot be copied, what loses power the moment it is diluted. That is why your gift never fit popular systems. It was never designed for mass approval or rapid consumption. Your gift is quiet, exact, and situational. It activates in moments where discernment matters more than speed, where clarity outweighs noise, and where a single correct decision outweighs 1,000 loud ones. You carry discernment without cynicism, the ability to see clearly without becoming bitter. You carry strength without aggression, the capacity to hold firm without needing to dominate. You carry authority without noise, a presence that does not announce itself yet cannot be ignored when it enters a room. These qualities cannot be taught, downloaded, or borrowed. They are not learned through theory, but forged through lived restraint, through seasons where you chose not to react, not to rush, not to take shortcuts that promised visibility, but required compromise. This is why shortcuts never appealed to you, even when they were available. This is why superficial success felt empty, even when it looked impressive from the outside. This is why being seen too early made you uncomfortable, because something in you knew that exposure without completion would weaken what was still forming. You were never meant to be mass market, never meant to appeal to everyone, never meant to be understood by crowds who consume quickly and forget just as fast. You were meant to be exact, and exact things require time, calibration, and pressure. Precision cannot be rushed without being ruined. What felt like waiting was actually alignment. What felt like being overlooked was actually protection. What felt like delay was the careful layering of wisdom, restraint, and timing. And now, as the season shifts, you may begin to notice that nothing was wasted. The silence sharpened you. The isolation refined you. The slow unfolding preserved you. When your gift finally moves, it will not need permission, applause, or explanation. It will work exactly where it is needed, exactly when it is needed, because it was never designed to impress the world, only to fulfill its purpose. Point 6. why you were protected while others fell. Look back carefully, because there were moments you should not have survived emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, moments when the weight was too heavy and the silence too loud, moments when others facing the same pressure collapsed, burned out, or lost themselves entirely, yet you remained standing, not because you were stronger, not because you had all the answers, but because you were covered. Protection rarely arrives the way the mind expects. It does not always look like rescue or relief. Sometimes it looks like delay, like doors refusing to open no matter how hard you push. Sometimes it looks like isolation, like being pulled away from people, places, and plans you thought you needed. Sometimes it looks like unanswered prayers that later reveal themselves as mercy. Every time you were prevented from making a decision that would have cost you your future, protection was active. You were blocked from paths that appeared promising but were misaligned with your calling. You were spared from success that would have corrupted your clarity, your character, or your peace. That is why hindsight now reveals patterns that once felt random and unfair. You were never abandoned, you were never forgotten, you were watched, guided, and quietly guarded the entire time. Point 7. The return of connection will be clean, calm, and non-urgent. Chosen. 1. When this phase ends, connection will return differently, not loudly, not dramatically, without desperation. You will no longer bond through wounds. You will no longer tolerate confusion for the sake of closeness. Relationships will feel calm. Conversations will not drain you. Presence will not require performance. This is how you will know alignment has arrived. You will not chase it. You will recognize it by the absence of anxiety. The loneliness trained you to live from internal fullness. Now connection will be a choice, not a need. This is the final seal. The protection phase ends not when people return, but when you no longer require them to feel complete. And that is when everything changes.